So imagine a world where your smartphone screen, the entire backbone of the global clean energy grid, and even the next generation of life-saving medicines just suddenly stop working.
Right, just completely halt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And not because we ran out of microchips or, I don't know, lithium or copper or cobalt, but because we ran out of water.
Which sounds ridiculous at first.
It really does. But we're talking about a very specific, highly contested, and honestly incredibly obscure type of water. And that is the blind spot we are diving into today. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are going on a mission to explore the hidden bedrock of the modern high-tech economy. And, you might think this material belongs exclusively in some, black and white textbook photo of a 1950s nuclear reactor. But in reality, it's quietly powering the OLED screen you are probably looking at right now.
It is, yeah. It's a massive pivot for a material that, let's be honest, most people haven't even thought about since high school chemistry class.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely haven't.
Right. We are talking about heavy water. And the framework for our exploration today is built on this really compelling body of research published by the Caesar Rodney Institute. It's authored by Dr. Andrew Cottone.
No.
And his work basically argues that our entire concept of resource security is, well, it's just pointed in the wrong direction. We spend all our time tracking metals, right? While completely ignoring a fundamental liquid that dictates whether those metals can actually be, processed into advanced technology in the first place.
That perfectly frames the conversation for us today.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hear a phrase like rare earth elements,
Yeah.
your mind instantly jumps to geopolitical tensions.
Supply chain panics. Yeah.
Exactly. We all live through those headlines about the global microchip shortages or the, frantic scramble for battery metals to build electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Andrew Cottone makes the case that the next rare earth isn't a metal at all. It's heavy water.
Yeah, which is just a wild concept to wrap your head around.
Right, so let's unpack this. How does a literal byproduct of legacy nuclear technology become, the most overlooked strategic asset of the 21st century?
Well, so we really have to step back and look at the anatomy of a strategic material, what makes something strategic. The life cycle of these critical inputs, it almost never starts with a loud, sudden arrival.
Right, it's not on the front page of the news.
No, not at all. They begin quietly. For decades, they are buried deep in these really dense technical supply chains. They're understood only by a handful of, chemical engineers or specialized physicists. It's just a mundane line item on an industrial spreadsheet.
Just humming along in the background.
Exactly. But then a technological phase shift occurs. A totally new industry discovers that this obscure material has a unique property, and that property solves a major high-tech bottleneck.
Oh, I see.
So demand suddenly expands, supply gets super tight, and what once seemed totally abundant becomes completely indispensable. And more importantly, it becomes fiercely contested globally.
And that is the exact trajectory that rare earth elements followed, right? If you rewind 30 or 40 years, things like neodymium or dysprosium.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
They were treated as highly niche, almost experimental inputs. But fast forward to today, and they sit at the absolute center of global competition. I mean, you literally cannot build a modern clean energy system or an advanced military radar or a high-performance EV motor without them.
You really can. And heavy water is entering this exact same phase shift right now. It completely lacks the public visibility of, a giant lithium mine, but it has every single dangerous hallmark of a strategic bottleneck.
Wow. Okay, so what are those hallmarks?
Well, the term we use for this in the industry is structural vulnerability. A material isn't critical just because it happens to be rare in the Earth's crust. It is critical because of the ecosystem it sits inside.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, if a material is suddenly required by multiple competing high-growth industries, say consumer electronics, pharmaceuticals, and next-generation energy all at once, and the production of that material is concentrated in the hands of just a few global players, you have built a massive structural vulnerability.
Right, because everyone needs it, but only a couple of people make it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the situation surrounding heavy water is arguably worse than rare earth metals because of how incredibly opaque its market is.
What do you mean by opaque? We don't know who is buying it.
We don't even really know what it costs in real time. You can go online right now, right, and find the spot price for a ton of lithium or a barrel of crude oil. It's public.
Right, it's just right there on a ticker.
Yeah, but you cannot easily do that for semiconductor-grade heavy water. It's a completely opaque market.
Okay, let me throw an analogy at you to, try to visualize how this works in the real world for everyone listening.
Sure, lay it on me.
Think of these strategic materials like the bass player in a rock band,
Okay, I like where this is going.
right? Everyone in the audience is paying attention to the lead singer. The lead singer is the shiny new quantum computer or the finished electric vehicle. They get all the magazine covers. Maybe the drummer is the power grid, just keeping the basic beat going.
Sure.
But the bass player is the heavy water. It's the rare earth element. They're standing in the background, out of the spotlight, quietly holding the entire structural rhythm of the song together. And honestly, most people don't even consciously realize what the bass player is doing.
Right, until they stop playing.
Exactly.
Okay.
The absolute second the bass stops playing, the entire song instantly falls apart. It sounds hollow. The whole system fails.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. And, the 2010 rare earth crisis is the perfect historical parallel to your bass player analogy.
Oh, man, I vaguely remember that. Prices just went absolutely crazy.
They did. Back then, China controlled something like 97% of the global rare earth processing capacity. 97%.
Which is just a staggering monopoly.
It was. And then there was this maritime dispute near the Senkaku Islands. A Chinese fishing trawler collided with some Japanese Coast Guard vessels, and in retaliation, China quietly restricted the export of rare earth elements to Japan.
Just cut them off.
Just cut them off. And it sent absolute shockwaves through the global tech and auto industries. Japanese electronics manufacturers panicked. Global prices for these obscure metals shot up by thousands of percent almost overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, it became the ultimate emblem of supply chain vulnerability. The world suddenly woke up and realized they had built their entire technological future on a foundation controlled by a single, highly unpredictable variable.
They realized they didn't own the bass player, and they couldn't just, hire a new one on a week's notice.
Exactly.
And so the core warning from Dr. Andrew Cottone's research is that heavy water is quietly becoming the new bass player for the next generation of technology.
That is exactly the premise, yes.
So if that is the case, we really need to ask, who currently owns all the instruments? Like, who is controlling this global supply right now? Because historically, the map looked very different than it does today, didn't it?
It looked vastly different. Historically, the map of heavy water production was anchored by a pretty stable mix of nations. Canada, India, Argentina, and Romania really formed the backbone of the global supply for a long time.
Okay, that's an interesting list of countries. What do they have in common?
They all shared one specific thing.
Yeah.
They had chosen to build specific types of nuclear reactors that fundamentally required heavy water to operate. Canada is the most famous example here. They developed what's called the CANDU reactor.
CANDU, C-A-N-D-U.
Yes, which stands for Canada, Deuterium, Uranium.
Okay, let's pause and explain the CANDU situation, because I think it's crucial for understanding why heavy water was even produced in such massive quantities in the first place. Because most nuclear reactors in the world, like the ones we have here in the United States, they use regular water, right?
Right, which physicists call light water.
Light water. So they use that to cool the reactor and slow down the neutrons. But to do that, you have to use enriched uranium.
Yes, and enriching uranium is an incredibly difficult, astronomically expensive, and politically very sensitive process.
Because it's a weapons risk, right?
Exactly, because it involves separating uranium isotopes. So Canada, back in the mid-20th century, decided they just didn't want to build those massive multi-billion-dollar uranium enrichment facilities.
Makes sense.
Right. They wanted to use natural uranium literally straight out of the ground to fuel their reactors. But there's a catch. If you use natural uranium with regular light water, the regular water actually absorbs too many neutrons, and the nuclear chain reaction just stops. It fizzles out.
So they needed a different kind of water.
They needed heavy water. Heavy water acts as what we call a moderator. It slows down the neutrons so they can split the next uranium atom, but crucially, it doesn't absorb them.
Oh, that's clever.
It was a brilliant engineering choice. It allowed Canada to build a thriving nuclear industry using completely unenriched uranium. But the massive trade-off was that they had to manufacture thousands and thousands of tons of heavy water.
Right, which is not easy.
Not at all. To do this, they built massive industrial infrastructure, most notably the Bruce Heavy Water Plant in Ontario.
I've seen pictures of the Bruce facility from back in its prime. It was an absolute behemoth. Just huge towers, massive pipes sprawling across the entire landscape. It was the largest heavy water production facility in the world, right?
It was. But that landscape has completely fractured now. That historical backbone is just eroding away. Argentina and Romania have effectively exited the global market as major active
Really
suppliers.
just out of the game completely.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, there are whispers that Argentina might try to reactivate a plant by 2026, but currently they are sidelined. And Canada, the giant of heavy water, is honestly a prime example of Western industrial decline in this specific sector.
Which is wild, considering they basically invented the commercial process.
Exactly, but the decline of Canadian production is like a slow-moving train wreck. The remaining supply is finite, and it's expected to decline significantly before the end of this decade.
What about that massive Bruce heavy water plant we just mentioned?
It's gone.
Gone, like demolished.
Completely. The decommissioning process started way back in 2003, and by 2014, the official licenses for the plant were fully revoked and just abandoned.
Wait, hold on. They didn't just put the plant in like a state of suspended animation. They actually abandoned the licenses.
Yes, and abandoning a regulatory license in the nuclear and chemical world is a major point of no return.
Because you can't just flip a switch to turn it back on.
Not at all. You aren't just turning off the lights and locking the front gate.
Yeah.
You are dismantling the incredibly complex regulatory framework that allows that plant to operate legally. You are laying off the specialized workforce, you are letting decades of institutional knowledge just dissipate, and you're tearing down the physical infrastructure.
That is, wow. So the West is voluntarily shutting down its capacity.
Yeah.
But what about the rest of the world? Because they certainly aren't slowing down, are they?
No, they're doing the exact opposite. The void left by the West is being aggressively filled by the East. The India Heavy Water Board, for example, is highly active and rapidly expanding.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They are strategically positioning themselves as the primary global supplier, and they're successfully luring Western intellectual property and advanced industrial activity into Asia. And then you have state actors like China and Russia.
Of course.
Right? Both maintain incredibly robust, state-directed heavy water capabilities. And until very recently, Iran possessed these capabilities as well.
Okay, so this brings us to a massive, glaring red flag.
Yeah.
We are moving production from friendly allies like Canada into the hands of what are officially designated as Foreign Entities of Concern, or EOSs.
Yes.
And heavy water stops being a standard industrial chemical the moment its production is dominated by adversaries, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a geopolitical lever.
A huge lever. The supply availability dictates whether a Western nation can conduct advanced research or manufacture next-generation semiconductors or even build future energy infrastructure.
Okay, but I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now. I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
We're talking about water.
Technically, yes.
It's H2O. Yes, the hydrogen atoms have an extra neutron, making it heavy, but it's not a rare earth mineral that we literally have to dig out of a specific volcano in the Congo. It's water. If we start running out, or if, Russia or China cuts us off, why can't we just find a big lake in Nevada, build a factory tomorrow, and make more?
I hear that argument all the time, and it's because extracting heavy water from regular water is one of the most punishing, complex, and energy-intensive chemical processes on the entire planet.
Really? Why is it so hard?
Well, heavy water does occur naturally in all water, but at an incredibly, incredibly low concentration. Roughly 1 out of every 5,000 drops of regular water is a drop of heavy water.
Wow, 1 in 5,000.
So you are dealing with massive, massive volumes of source material. You cannot just run lake water through a commercial reverse osmosis filter under your sink.
Right, it's not that simple.
No. Historically, separating heavy water required something called the Girdler sulfide process. This involves pumping millions of gallons of water through massive towering columns while simultaneously pumping highly toxic, highly corrosive hydrogen sulfide gas through those same towers at different temperatures.
Wait, hydrogen sulfide, isn't that the rotten egg gas?
It smells like rotten eggs, yes, but it is incredibly dangerous stuff. It is lethal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the deuterium atoms slowly migrate from the water to the gas and then back to the water, gradually concentrating the heavy water stage by agonizing stage.
So you are basically building an operation that requires immense capital investment, super specialized chemical engineering, staggering amounts of electricity and heat, and the ability to safely handle massive quantities of a highly toxic lethal gas.
Exactly. You cannot just flip a switch and start producing this stuff. If the global supply dries up, or if an adversary cuts off exports, it could easily take a decade to permit, design, construct, and commission a new, large-scale domestic facility in the United States.
A decade of lead time. That is 10 years where your entire tech sector, your energy sector, and your medical research are just starved of a foundational material.
It would be a dark age for innovation, honestly.
And the opacity of the market makes this even more dangerous, doesn't it? Because if it were a standard commodity like copper, you would see the global price slowly rising on the commodities exchange. And that would give the free market a clear signal to start building new factories.
Right, capitalism would step in. But because pricing isn't transparent and large volumes of heavy water are tied up in state-directed programs or these really opaque long-term contracts, the market signals are completely muffled.
Interesting.
And this opens the door for state actors to manipulate the landscape. A foreign entity of concern could easily flood the global market with artificially cheap, heavy water.
Just dump it on the market.
Exactly. They keep the price artificially depressed just long enough to bankrupt any Western startup trying to build a domestic plant.
Oh, that's nefarious.
Then, once they have secured a global monopoly and Western capacity is dead, they choke the supply to starve our innovation.
It's a slow-motion ambush. It really is. But this raises the most important question of all. If Canada abandoned its massive plant in 2014, it clearly seemed like global demand was dropping, right? They wouldn't have shut it down if they were making money hand over fist.
No, they wouldn't have.
So why is there suddenly a massive surge in demand right now? What changed in the last decade? And I think this brings us to the microscopic revolution.
It does.
The fact that heavy water has completely outgrown its legacy role in those old nuclear reactors.
The science driving this shift is truly remarkable. To understand it, we have to look really closely at the magic ingredient inside heavy water, which is deuterium.
Okay, deuterium.
Deuterium is simply that heavier isotope of hydrogen. It has one proton and one neutron, whereas a regular hydrogen atom only has a proton.
Right, hence the heavy part.
Exactly. And the ability to isolate deuterium and precisely place it into specific molecules is a field called isotopic control.
Isotopic control.
Yes. And isotopic control is becoming absolutely critical in atomic-level precision manufacturing.
So this is where we completely leave the nuclear power plants behind and enter the world of semiconductors and OLED screens.
Right, because in standard chemical manufacturing, you use a massive amount of hydrocarbons. These are molecules made up of carbon and regular hydrogen atoms.
Like plastics, fuels, that sort of thing.
Everything, really. The bond between a carbon atom and a standard hydrogen atom, known as a CH bond, is basically the foundation of organic chemistry.
Okay.
It has a certain baseline strength, but when you replace that standard hydrogen atom with the deuterium atom, creating a carbon-deuterium or CD bond, something fascinating happens at the quantum level. The bond becomes significantly more stable and durable.
Okay, let's break that down with an analogy so we can really picture what's happening at the nanoscale.
Sounds good.
Think of building a microscopic suspension bridge. Let's say that bridge is a single transistor inside the processing chip of your smartphone.
Okay.
There are billions of these bridges inside your phone. Millions of times a second, electricity, which we can picture as a massive fleet of heavy, fast-moving trucks, drives across that microscopic bridge. And on top of that, the whole environment gets incredibly hot. The entire structure is vibrating violently.
It is an incredibly chaotic, high-stress environment at the molecular level.
Right. So if you build that bridge using standard hydrogen atoms, you are basically using standard steel bolts to hold it together. Over time, because of the extreme heat and the constant electrical traffic, those steel bolts start to vibrate.
And they loosen.
They loosen. The chemical bond breaks down. Eventually, the microscopic bridge collapses. The transistor dies.
Yep.
And when enough transistors die, your phone starts lagging, it overheats, or the screen gets that permanent burn-in.
We've all seen that.
But if you swap out that standard hydrogen for deuterium, you are essentially replacing those standard steel bolts with solid titanium bolts.
The titanium bolt analogy is scientifically spot on. In chemistry, this phenomenon is called the kinetic isotope effect.
Kinetic isotope effect.
Yes, because the deuterium atom is twice as heavy as standard hydrogen due to that extra neutron. It physically vibrates at a lower frequency. It has a lower zero-point energy. It literally requires more kinetic energy, more heat, more electrical stress to break a carbon-deuterium bond than a carbon-hydrogen bond.
Wow. So the titanium bolts don't vibrate loose. They hold the bridge together even under extreme stress.
Exactly. This stability directly extends device lifetimes and dramatically improves performance. And you have to remember, we're operating at a scale where semiconductor architectures are shrinking down to 3 nanometers or even 2 nanometers across.
Which is unfathomably small.
It is. At that incredibly microscopic scale, a single hydrogen bond breaking isn't just a minor degradation issue anymore. It causes catastrophic failure of the entire pathway. The marginal improvements you get from using deuterium aren't just incremental, they are decisive.
It's the literal difference between a working next-generation supercomputer and a very expensive paperweight.
It really is.
And this isn't just theoretical chemistry cooked up in a lab, is it? The research points to hard commercial data. There was a pivotal 2023 paper published in Nature Communications detailing exactly how deuteration improves the stability of OLED displays.
Yeah, that paper was a huge deal. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. It is the premier screen technology in almost every high-end smartphone, smartwatch, and television today.
The colors are just amazing on them.
They are, but the biggest engineering challenge with OLEDs has always been the blue light emitters.
Why blue specifically?
Because red and green emitters are relatively stable, but creating blue light requires higher energy photons. That higher energy literally shakes the blue emitting molecules apart much faster than the others, and that leads to screen burn-in and color shifting over time.
Ah, okay. So by replacing the hydrogen with deuterium in those specific blue emitter molecules, you lock them in place.
Yes, you put in the titanium bolts.
And you dramatically extend the life and the brightness of the screen?
Precisely. And then you apply this exact same logic to semiconductor fabrication. There is a whole dataset detailing a process called high-pressure deuterium annealing.
Okay, what is annealing?
Well, when manufacturers etch microscopic circuits into a silicon wafer, the process actually damages the silicon crystal lattice, leaving what they call dangling bonds at the interface. Historically, they would bake the wafers in regular hydrogen gas to cap those dangling bonds and smooth out the electrical pathways.
But the hot electrons zipping through the chip would eventually just knock the regular hydrogen atoms away.
Exactly, they would break the steel bolts. So they started baking the advanced wafers in high-pressure deuterium gas instead. The heavier deuterium atoms lock into those dangling bonds and just refuse to budge, drastically reducing hot carrier degradation and improving the overall reliability of the chips.
So to summarize the stakes here for you listening, the screen you are looking at to consume this deep dive and the processing chip doing all the thinking inside your device are increasingly dependent on a byproduct of 1950s nuclear technology.
Yep.
A byproduct that the West has largely stopped producing, and that foreign adversaries are rapidly consolidating.
The commercial implications are honestly staggering. Think about it. If your company's microchip lasts twice as long, can run twice as hot, and processes data faster because you secured a supply of deuterium, and your competitor used regular hydrogen because they couldn't source heavy water.
Your competitor loses the market. It's game over.
Game over. And heavy water is also critical for photonics, which is using light to transmit data instead of electricity.
Like fiber optics.
Exactly. Creating ultra-pure optical fibers for high-speed internet infrastructure heavily relies on isotopic control to prevent signal loss. The future of how humanity processes and transmits information is inextricably linked to heavy water.
Wow. So it's in our screens, our computing chips, our data cables. But Dr. Andrew Cottone's research warns that this electronics boom is just the tip of the spear.
It really is.
We are facing a massive convergence. The ecosystem of heavy water dependence is expanding way beyond consumer electronics. It is migrating into a multi-domain enabling material. So let's explore these new domains, starting with what might be honestly the most consequential technology in human history.
Fusion energy.
Oh, fusion, yeah. Traditional nuclear power, what we use today, is fission. That's splitting a heavy atom like uranium. Fusion is the exact opposite. It's combining light atoms together, which releases massive amounts of energy.
It is the exact process that powers the sun and the stars, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and for decades, it has been the holy grail of clean, virtually limitless energy without long-lived radioactive waste. Every major fusion energy project on Earth, whether it uses massive magnetic confinement like the ITER tokamak in France, or laser-based inertial confinement, relies on a specific fuel mixture.
Deuterium and tritium.
Yes, the DT reaction. While the sun fuses regular hydrogen protons together, doing that on Earth requires pressures we simply cannot replicate.
Because we don't have the gravity of a star.
Exactly. The deuterium-tritium reaction is the easiest fusion reaction to ignite in a laboratory, requiring temperatures of around 100 million degrees Celsius. But here is the kicker. You cannot run a commercial fusion power plant without massive, continuous supplies of deuterium.
Oh, so if you don't have heavy water.
If fusion energy is the chalice that will save the global climate, heavy water is the only material that can actually fill it.
That is profound. Okay, next domain. Life sciences and pharmaceuticals. We're seeing heavy water revolutionize how we design drugs. The research points to a major shift in drug discovery centered entirely around deuterium.
This is such a brilliant application of that kinetic isotope effect we discussed with semiconductors.
How so?
Well, when you swallow a pharmaceutical pill, your body immediately recognizes it as a foreign substance. Your liver goes right to work trying to metabolize and break that drug down so you can excrete it. It does this using specific enzymes, primarily these things called cytochrome P450 enzymes, which are specialized molecular machines designed to snip carbon-hydrogen bonds.
Ah, so the liver is basically finding the weakest steel bolts on the drug molecule and unbolting the bridge.
That is a perfect way to describe it. So pharmaceutical chemists realized that if they map exactly which carbon-hydrogen bond the liver attacks first, they can swap out that specific hydrogen atom for a deuterium atom.
They put a titanium bolt exactly where the liver tries to break the drug.
Exactly. By doing this, the liver struggles to break the CD bond. The metabolism of the drug slows down significantly. This is called a deuterated drug.
Okay, so what is the practical benefit for a patient?
It means the active pharmaceutical ingredient stays in your bloodstream longer and at a much more consistent concentration. So a patient might only have to take 1 pill a day instead of 3.
That's a huge quality of life improvement.
And more importantly, it often reduces toxic side effects because the drug isn't breaking down into harmful metabolites as quickly. The FDA actually approved the first deuterated drug, deuterbenzene, a few years ago, and it has just opened the floodgates for a multi-billion-dollar frontier in medicine.
Unbelievable. Let's talk about the last frontier mentioned in the research, advanced sensing and quantum technology. The documentation discusses something called quantum sensing-enabled deuterium NMR.
Right.
Please break that down for me like I'm 5, because that sounds incredibly dense.
It does sound dense, but it's fascinating. NMR stands for nuclear magnetic resonance. It is the underlying physical principle behind the MRI machines you see in hospitals, and it's how chemists determine the exact structure of unknown molecules.
Okay, so it's a way of seeing things we can't see with a microscope.
Right. Traditional NMR works by looking at the magnetic spin of regular hydrogen protons in water. You put the sample in a massive magnet, you hit it with radio waves, and you listen to the signal that the protons give off.
Oh, so how does deuterium change the game here?
A regular hydrogen nucleus has a magnetic spin of 1/2. A deuterium nucleus, because of that extra neutron, has a spin of 1. It interacts with magnetic fields in a fundamentally different way. It has what we call a quadrupole moment.
A quadrupole moment.
Yes. So if you combine deuterium labeling with emerging quantum sensing technologies, which use incredibly sensitive quantum states to detect minuscule magnetic changes, you can achieve structural imaging with nanoscale sensitivity.
Meaning you can see even smaller, even clearer.
Exactly. You are essentially using the unique magnetic signature of deuterium as a silent, background-free probe to map the structure of advanced materials or complex biological tissues at an unbelievably microscopic scale.
Let's pull all these threads together, because this is getting massive. If we look at the historical pattern of critical materials, they never become a global crisis because of one single use case. Like, rare earths didn't cause a panic just because they were used in, say, wind turbines.
Right, it was a combination.
The crisis happened because wind turbines, electric vehicle motors, military drone radars, and smartphone speakers all converged on the exact same limited resource at the exact same moment in history.
That convergence is the literal definition of systemic risk. And the core argument being presented in this research is that energy, human health, quantum computing, consumer electronics, and national security are right now, at this very second, converging on heavy water.
So what does this mean for you listening right now? If our communication networks, our future medical treatments, and our future power grid all require the exact same obscure resource, a supply chain disruption is infinitely more catastrophic than a standard shortage.
Oh, without a doubt.
We all lived through the chip shortage. You couldn't buy a PlayStation. Cars were sitting in lots for months waiting for components. But a heavy water shortage is a total systemic failure. It throttles semiconductor manufacturing, stalls life-saving pharmaceutical R&D, grounds fusion energy development, and degrades national security, all simultaneously.
The alarms are ringing across multiple industries right now.
So who is the person pulling the fire alarm? Let's take a close look at the architect of this research, Dr. Andrew Cottone, and the institution amplifying his warning. because I think it is always vital to understand the background and the lens through which a strategic warning is written.
Absolutely. So Dr. Andrew Cottone is a PhD organometallic and process chemist. He earned his doctorate at the University of Florida.
Okay, organometallic. That means carbon and metal.
Yes, organometallic chemistry is the study of chemical compounds containing at least one bond between a carbon atom of an organic molecule and a metal. It is incredibly complex, highly specialized work that focuses heavily on molecular structures and bonding.
So he's deep in the science.
Very deep. But he isn't just an academic theorizing in a university lab. He has 25 years of hard operational experience in Delaware as an inventor and a highly successful entrepreneur in the chemical manufacturing space.
Oh, so he actually builds things.
He does. He joined a company called CB Research and Development in 2001, and then he co-founded Adhesius in 2005. Over the next decade, he grew Adhesius from a small team of just 17 people to a major operation with nearly 180 employees, expanding their laboratory footprint to over 100,000 square feet.
That's massive growth for a specialized lab.
It is, but the critical detail here is the culmination of that growth. In 2016, he successfully sold Adhesius to Universal Display Corporation.
Universal Display Corporation. Wait, their ticker symbol on the NASDAQ is literally OLED, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, wow.
That connects his commercial history directly to the OLED deuterium technology we were just dissecting earlier. He was at the ground floor, building the advanced chemical supply chains that support the displays in modern devices.
He has actually lived the reality of trying to source and scale these highly specialized molecules.
Exactly. And in 2023, he founded a new venture called Deuterium, Inc. The explicit goal of Deuterium is to build sustainable domestic plants in the Mid-Atlantic region that co-produce heavy water and clean hydrogen.
Finding someone with deep, specialized scientific training who also possesses a proven track record in the brutal, capital-intensive world of chemical manufacturing is incredibly rare.
It's very rare. He bridges the gap between theoretical quantum chemistry and the hard industrial reality of, pouring concrete, building distillation columns, and managing supply chains.
And the research itself is published by the Caesar Rodney Institute, which is a Delaware-based, nonprofit public policy research organization founded in 2008. They focus on evidence-based solutions in energy, economics, and policy. So they're providing the platform to translate this highly technical chemical problem into actionable public policy.
Right.
Now, I want to address the disclosure mentioned in the research head-on, because transparency is totally key for this deep dive.
Sure, absolutely.
The paper openly states that Dr. Andrew Cottone holds patents, investments, and business interests related to heavy water and deuterium technologies. I mean, he founded a company designed to build heavy water plants. So how should a critical thinker weigh his stark warnings, knowing he has a financial interest in the solution?
We have to analyze it objectively. A skeptic could easily argue that he stands to benefit if the U.S. government suddenly decides to throw billions of dollars into domestic heavy water production, right? It's the old saying, the man selling umbrellas says a storm is coming.
Right. But there's another side to that coin.
The flip side is that the people who are usually the very first to spot a systemic market failure are the ones actively trying to build within that market. An academic or a government bureaucrat might look at a global supply spreadsheet and just assume the free market will naturally balance itself out over time.
Yeah, that supply will just meet demand eventually.
Right. But an entrepreneur who is actively trying to secure raw materials, navigate foreign supply chains, and build physical infrastructure has firsthand, granular visibility into the bottlenecks. His financial stake is precisely what gives him the context to see the structural vulnerability.
He is physically bumping into the geopolitical walls that the rest of the world won't hit for another 5 years.
Exactly. So we just have to read the research, understanding that he is offering an industrially minded solution to the crisis he has identified.
And because his industrial footprint is rooted in the Mid-Atlantic, the research naturally pivots to a geographical solution, specifically the state of Delaware. The argument isn't just about sounding the alarm, it's about turning this strategic vulnerability into a massive domestic economic opportunity.
If the global supply chains are drying up and the technical barriers are too high for, say, a random Silicon Valley software startup to solve, who is actually in a position to fix this domestically, the research points directly to Delaware.
Which is fascinating because when most people think of advanced technology hubs, they think of Austin, Texas, or the Bay Area. They don't immediately think of Delaware.
They don't, but Delaware has a deep historic foundation in chemistry, material science, and specialty manufacturing. You have to look at the industrial legacy of the state. Delaware gave birth to many of the modern chemical wonders of the 20th century through companies like DuPont.
Oh, right. DuPont has a massive history there.
The physical infrastructure, the industrial zoning, and most importantly, the institutional memory for managing complex, hazardous chemical processing are already firmly embedded in the state's DNA.
And the research highlights the University of Delaware and the broader regional ecosystem as foundational assets too, right?
Yes, they have world-class academic programs in chemical engineering, biomanufacturing, clean hydrogen, and materials research. The vision here is to combine that legacy manufacturing muscle with cutting-edge academic research.
It positions Delaware not just as a corporate haven, but potentially as the absolute epicenter of isotopic control for the Western Hemisphere.
Which would be huge.
Yeah. And the blueprint calls on policymakers, universities, and industry leaders to act immediately. They need to map the heavy water supply chains, identify the specific workforce needs, because, as we discussed, running a hydrogen sulfide exchange plant requires highly specialized engineers.
You can't just hire off the street for that.
No. And they need to attract federal funding for pilot projects. They want to create high-wage manufacturing jobs, but they have to do it before the constraints force their hand. We talked about how long it takes to permit and build these facilities. 10 years of lead time.
10 years is a long time to be vulnerable.
Strategic leadership is infinitely easier to build before a crisis hits.
If you wait until the global heavy water supply dries up to start figuring out how to get a zoning permit for a chemical plant in Delaware, the game is already over. Waiting means the vulnerability becomes entrenched.
And foreign entities of concern will dictate the terms of our technological development, our energy transition, and our medical advancements.
Delaware has the institutional scale to move early and act as the blueprint for domestic onshoring.
We have covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
Let's synthesize the journey we've taken today. We started by looking at the shifting geopolitical chessboard. We mapped the slow, voluntary retreat of Western capacity in Canada and the aggressive consolidation by state actors in India, China, and Russia.
And then we zoomed all the way in to examine the microscopic reality of why this shift is so dangerous. We explored how a simple atomic swap from regular hydrogen to deuterium creates the kinetic isotope effect.
The titanium bolts.
The titanium bolts needed for our OLED screens to shine brighter and our advanced semiconductors to survive the brutal conditions of nanoscale computing.
And we looked at the massive convergence on the horizon. The fact that the promise of fusion energy, the next generation of deuterated pharmaceutical drugs, and the current technology in your pocket all hinge on a single, obscure, invisible liquid that is controlled by fewer and fewer players.
The ultimate lesson from Dr. Andrew Cottone's research is this: do not repeat the mistakes of the rare earth crisis. Human nature and free market economics often prevent us from recognizing a strategic dependence until it has already hardened into a catastrophe.
Right.
The window to secure heavy water, to build the domestic infrastructure in places like Delaware, is still open, but the structural forces are shifting rapidly.
The time to build the umbrella is before the hurricane makes landfall, which leaves me with a final, lingering thought for you to chew on today. We opened by talking about how invisible the bedrock of our modern technology can be. If the next rare earth isn't even a metal, but a highly specialized, extra-heavy form of water, what other mundane, ubiquitous materials in our daily lives are quietly being transformed into the geopolitical battlegrounds of tomorrow? What else are we simply not seeing just because we forgot to look closely enough?
It really forces you to look at the physical world around you through an entirely different lens.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the hidden world of heavy water and the future of isotopic control. Keep questioning what's beneath the surface.